Right, let's go. All right. Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock, so I want to respect everybody's time. Thank you for joining us for our first of 3 formal conversations, but I'm sure many months of ongoing conversations. My name is Katie Doling. I am the city manager here at Lafayette. And I just want to introduce some colleagues that I'm joined here with who will be giving the majority of the presentation. I'm here with Megan Davis, who is the Deputy City Administrator, Alex Nelson, who is the Assistant to the City Manager. Also joined with Community Services Director Melissa Heisel, Communications Manager Debbie Wilmot, or Communications Director, Communications Manager Natalie Miller. So we're all here to help support and answer any questions that you have. Tonight's presentation, we hope to be about 45 minutes with opportunity to go into the lobby and share some feedback and comments. There will be opportunities for questions throughout, but really want to structure this meeting in particular for kind of how did we get here for some of the capital projects that we're looking forward to, and really provide an overview of 3 major projects, and then very briefly touch on some of the project costs and financing overview. That will be the second meeting here at the end of this month, and then some question and answers and wrap up. I do want to note that this meeting is being recorded, and so we will have those questions being live streamed and posted on the website. If you don't feel comfortable asking your questions in public, we can have a piece of paper, you can write them down, and we can ask them for you as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Deputy City Manager Megan Davis.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. As City Manager Doling mentioned, tonight's program is going to be specifically focused on quality services and amenities. And so tonight we're going to be talking about the projects, again, kind of how we got here, and a little bit less about some of the other components like the financial stewardship and about sustainability. Those will be at the second and third meeting. So we invite you to come back for those meetings as well, and or they'll all be posted online and you'll be able to watch them at that time. Okay, just to start kind of at the high level, the city manages numerous capital assets, as you can imagine. Everything from buildings to vehicles, police cars, fire trucks, everyday vehicles that people use. Okay. All right, let me try it again. So our fleet of vehicles, streets, sidewalks, bikeways, those are all considered capital assets. Signage, all the signage around town, entryway signage, lighting poles, utility infrastructure, which is everything from water treatment plants, water collection facilities, stormwater, and then technology. So this might be things you don't see underground in terms of communication technology, as well as potentially towers, parks, playgrounds, trails, everything that comes along with it. So picnic tables, shelters, all that type of thing. And then property, open space, other open lands that the city might own for other purposes. So we really have a great kind of breadth and depth of capital assets, all of which we are stewards of for the people of Lafayette, and that we work hard to maintain and sustain at the highest level that we possibly can. We're going to focus tonight, and through this project, we're really focusing on the city facilities that are more of what you would consider kind of city buildings and public-facing city facilities that you as residents might access. We have over 30 facilities of this nature, and it's everything from community spaces, public safety utilities like the police department, our 2 fire departments, or our 2 fire stations, all the water treatment infrastructure that I talked about, but also the treatment plants and the collection facilities, and then more of the operations and administrative support services. So that would be, places like City Hall and other facilities where we have staff kind of working in and out of. These are primarily maintained by our facilities division, which is a department of 4. So it's a lot of facilities for a small number of people to maintain. And these facilities, the value of these assets is over 175 million that's insured value. So that's doesn't necessarily capture the contents and the entirety of the value of those properties, but it's quite significant. So once again, really valuable assets that we work hard to maintain as best we can. We also have strategic priorities, and council has identified these strategic outcomes that we work towards and we align our work with. And so kind of two of the primary ones that we're looking at or talking about tonight are around excellent city services and infrastructure, as well as quality community amenities. Through this project, though, these strategic outcomes are really, all of them are kind of present in some way. All of these facilities, we intend to be a safe, welcoming, and inclusive place for all residents to access, create a sense of place, so really kind of align and be consistent with what we as a community consider as part of our identity. And then, of course, fiscal responsibility, environmental stewardship, and these other outcomes. I'm going to let Alex talk a little bit about the budget.
Thank you, Megan, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Alex, and I'll begin by talking a bit about our city budget. So for context, in 2025, our city's budget was around $121 million, and it's broken up here on the screen. You can see we break it up into operating expenses, salaries and benefits, debt, and then capital. And so our capital expenses are about a quarter of the budget, roughly 23%. However, when we dig a little deeper into that, we'll see that about 84% of those capital funds are actually already dedicated or coming from an enterprise fund, meaning the money is collected to go to a specific service or specific type of infrastructure, such as water, our parks maintenance, or fleet replacement. So that would be replacing our police vehicles, fire trucks, ambulances, things like that. There's a remaining portion that is largely spent on transportation projects. So we run some annual maintenance programs for our streets and sidewalks, as well as fund some larger one-time projects like a bridge replacement that's happening this year on 120th Street over Coal Creek. And so that leaves about 2% of our capital budget for actual facility maintenance. And historically, the city has spent around or budgeted around $200,000 to $650,000 per year on these maintenance activities. And that's really because to be consistent with some budgeting best practices, there are some other items we need to cover first, such as debt service, operating costs to make sure we can continue providing the services that our residents rely on. And so whatever's left can kind of be used to support these projects. That means that a lot of these funds are used to support generally routine maintenance, some replacement of failing equipment, and then when we can, doing proactive maintenance. And that's all to say that really our current revenue streams and funding sources don't really provide enough to address some of the larger projects and needs that we know need to happen for these facilities. So for some additional information, here's what we've funded in the 2025 budget in terms of facility maintenance. You can see it's largely, again, equipment replacement or addressing some, trying to be proactive and address some facility deficiencies. So the first is replacement of our HVAC or heating and cooling system for the library. That's in the photo on the right. You can see we had to bring in a big crane to lift the heavy piece of equipment onto the roof of the library, as well as refurbishing the elevator at the library to make sure that the building is as accessible as possible to patrons. We're also replacing the boiler at the police department and then replacing the floors and appliances at both of our fire stations because those facilities get quite a bit of use, as you might imagine. We're looking at replacing a number of our generators as well to make sure that we can be as resilient as possible in the event of an Excel outage, perhaps, to make sure we can keep operating and provide services. And then finally, doing some minor parking lot repairs around city facilities. So when we were talking about these projects, an interesting perspective was, as we were discussing them, was thinking about where the city was when these facilities were initially built and how much has changed since then. So you'll see here, this is a timeline, and it's probably hard to see for those in the back of the room, but I'll walk you through. What this is really comparing is the population of Lafayette compared to when these facilities that we're discussing tonight were constructed. And so on the bottom, we see the population that starts at 1970. We had about 3,500 residents. And then fast forward 50 years to 2020, and we're over 30,000. So that's quite a significant growth. And you might imagine that puts some unique pressures on the services that cities provide. We are not unique in that. But also, there's been an evolution of the services that cities provide over that time. If you think back to 1970, 1980, it was probably really focused on providing waters, making sure there's sewer and likely some parks maintenance. And we're still doing all of that in hopefully a much more sophisticated manner. But things have just evolved and changed so much since then. We've, for example, didn't need an IT department back in 1970 because there wasn't technology to maintain, but now there is, and it's critical to our operations. And so not only do we want to make sure it's functioning, but we want to make sure that it's safe and we're safe from cybersecurity, as an example of a change in services. So when we think about the facilities themselves, the service center was constructed originally in 1973, so 52 years old. This city hall where we are right now was built in 1985, so that's 40 years old. And then the recreation center was constructed in 1990. So again, those were pretty early on, and we've seen a lot of changes and growth since then. So when we began discussing each of these projects, we approached all of them with a fairly comprehensive facilities assessment. And less related to that assessment, but worth noting that in 2020, the city actually purchased land for a new civic center, so to replace this current building. Just about 2 blocks north of us, there's the vacant parcel of land across the street from the RTD Park and Ride. So that was in 2020, and then in 2023, the city began investigating the feasibility of expanding the Bob Burger Recreation Center and that aquatic center as well. And then last year, we worked with a consultant to do some work and conduct facility needs assessment and feasibility analysis for this building, the City Hall, what it would look like to construct a new facility on that vacant land, as well as looking at our service center. And so we took a pretty comprehensive approach to all of these, but they were really focused around 4 key considerations when we were looking at each of the facilities. So the first was that we wanted to make sure that any potential improvements would address both the current needs as well as the future needs that we anticipate for each of those facilities and programs. We also took a pretty thorough cost-benefit analysis to determine whether it made more sense to renovate the existing facility or rebuild and construct new facility. Of course, sustainability is important to us and our community, so we were trying to think through sustainability and resiliency lens whenever possible, as well as aligning these projects with what we know are our community's values and those that were adopted by City Council, as Megan mentioned earlier. So ultimately, through these assessments, we came out with 3 recommendations, which we'll touch on more as we get into more of the project details. And that was to replace the current City Hall with a new Civic Center, renovate and expand the Recreation Center, and then renovate and expand the Service Center. So we'll pause there for our first round of questions. That's kind of our background information, and see what questions any members of the group might have. We have a microphone just so we can make sure everyone hears. So.
It may be premature to ask, but have there been timelines established for these? Will they all happen simultaneously, or will they be prioritized based on funding availability?
That's a good question. There are some timelines. We would need to refine the actual, the exact sequencing of them, but we're going to touch on the timelines a bit at the end. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you taking into consideration the cost of goods with for things that you would have to buy outside the country with the tariffs on?
We did include, so we'll touch more on a bit of the financial information at the end and get into much more detail at our next session, but we did try to build in some flexibility for the unknowns, such as those.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So when you talk about what the population of Lafayette could look like in 5 to 10 years, I know that's still a really big question mark because of other meetings that are happening in the city. Is there plan A, plan B, plan C, depending on if Lafayette anticipates growing by 5 or 50,000 people in the next decade?
I would say we took into consideration the growth sort of on a trajectory that we would estimate a population growth in the upcoming years, not considering any legislative changes or policy changes. And so looking at, we are generally pretty built out. So we really just looked at that growth. I mean, if something like that were to happen, we would be doing a full reconsideration of, for example, our water services. We would have to look at, a rec center site.
A second.
Yeah, so that would be a whole different conversation.
Yeah,
so
okay.
we're really basing it on, what we know, and what we can reasonably project, with the growth of the city. Yeah.
The current facilities that will be replaced, what will happen to the old buildings?
That's a good question, and we don't have the answer to that yet. We're, this is a preliminary conversation, and City Council would be obviously involved, and as would the community. So it could be any range of things that could, happen to those sites, whether it's repurposing them for something or, to selling them, or there could be any range of things. But that would be all part of the decision as if we move these forward. Yeah, good questions. Okay, all right, we'll move along.
Does the city of Lafayette own the senior center?
Yes, yes. That is very relevant and a good segue to our next discussion. So based on the feasibility and assessment work that we've done and really looking holistically at all of the facilities that I mentioned earlier on, we prioritize those facilities that, due to their age, due to their condition, deferred maintenance, their sort of and where they are in their kind of lifespan, their usefulness and sort of practicality based on what our current and future needs are. We identified these 3 projects that City Council helped prioritize for the Bob Burger Recreation Center and the Civic Center, so City Hall, and then the Service Center. So these projects you can see are all located kind of in central Lafayette, downtown Lafayette. If you're not familiar with the Rec Center, it's off Baseline and Public Road. And then the Civic Center, as Alex mentioned, would be just north of where City Hall is here. And the Service Center is not a public-facing facility. That's one that houses basically kind of, it's like the heart of a lot of our city operations. So all of our transportation and snow plowing and parks and all that happens out of Service Center. So it's kind of tucked away. It's just kind of south of South Boulder Road on Avalon Avenue. So these 3 projects are the 3 that we're kind of discussing with the community at this point. We did the assessment at the Rec Center identified kind of a range of issues. One of the primary and I would say most kind of evident issues that we've been facing is aging and inefficient mechanical systems. So at over 35 years old, particularly the Aquatic Center has reached its end of life. So the infrastructure, the mechanical infrastructure, all of the piping is really in pretty bad shape. And so we also have kind of some broken amenities out there due to age. The big slide has been closed. It is beyond repair at this point. We would have to replace it. So that would be about a $500,000 investment to take it out and put it back in. We also, the design of the pool is really outdated in terms of what people look for accessibility, safety, and just to meet kind of the needs of users today. And then we also have some issues around kind of our fitness and our other recreation services. The fitness spaces aren't adequate in terms of, size and capacity to meet the demand. And we also, the locker rooms and restrooms aren't sized right or configured to serve kind of the current use and capacity. And then finally, there isn't really community use space at the recreation center. And so we really would like this to be more of kind of a community center, community attraction, where we can combine some of the other community needs and community opportunities with kind of the active activities, active lifestyle, and with the recreation. If you look around at other neighboring jurisdictions, you've probably seen that our rec center is pretty dated and it's not really comparable to what you see in other communities of this size. So those were some of the things that we identified. So we're looking at these projects kind of, again, through these 3 lenses. In terms of improving this to be a quality amenity, we would renovate and expand the aquatic center and expand the fitness amenities. So it would be an expansion of aquatics and then kind of a renovation of certain areas. I'll show you in a minute. This would help us avoid some of these stopgap repairs and the disruptive maintenance that we've had to undertake by tearing up concrete to get to the underlying pipes to make repairs, which requires a full closure. We had a 6-month closure last summer of the aquatic center due to the extent of the repairs. And then kind of along with that, we were having extensive water leaks, which from a sustainability perspective was costly and also just, wasting our valuable resources. These systems in all of these buildings, from a sustainability perspective, they simply can't be retrofitted to meet kind of new energy efficiency and sustainability standards. So this gives us an opportunity to create kind of a new building envelope and new mechanical systems and more energy efficient infrastructure. So the rec center, what you see here is, I'll talk about the three colors. What's in the gray and the yellow is what's current at the rec center in terms of the footprint. To orient yourself, the baseline road is on the south side there, so kind of on the bottom. And the blue would be additions, and the green would be kind of outdoor, either changes or additions. So big change would be starting at the very south end, would be an addition where the whole aquatic center would be reconfigured and there would be a new larger lap pool. And then the pool area in yellow would be totally reconfigured to add a therapeutic swimming pool, which is a warm water swimming pool, which is good for both older adults, people with injuries, and children. And then also to have a children's play area, which is a zero entry area that's safe for all ages, as well as a slide and a lazy river. You will also see then up to the right, there's a little blue square. That would be a community space, which again, all of this is very preliminary. So these are kind of concepts that we have put together, but part of the process will be to get community input and look in more detail at what the needs and desires are of the community. But that space could be a teen space is what we're envisioning for teen, both programming and just kind of a hangout space. And then up to the right, you'll see two new additions. One is for a fitness space, which is where you could have fitness programming classes. It would have potentially a rooftop outdoor fitness area as well, along with some new restrooms. And then north of that would be an older adults or senior programming space where we could actually have either the senior services completely move here to co-locate those services with the rest of the rec center programs and services. With the outdoor spaces, there is a space where we potentially could locate a pickleball court that would be outside in that courtyard area and would be in a good location in terms of proximity to residents. It's farther away from residents and could be a good spot for that. So you can look at more outside. That's just kind of an overview. So the project status, as I said, it's very conceptual. And so we did this in 2023 and 24. We did do substantial environmental engineering, soils and structural, particularly when we had to dig up under in the pool area. So we took the opportunity to take a look more closely at what the site looked like from an engineering perspective. Cost estimates are preliminary, but an additional design will be necessary. We did, as Alex said, escalate the cost to 2026 costs, and we would require more public input, which we'd have probably a up to 12-month design process, and then construction would be about 18 months. Any questions before we move to the Civic Center?
Would the rec center be entirely closed for those 18 months?
I don't know if we need this or not. The question was, would the rec center be entirely closed? It's a good question. When we get into design and we understand, what the scope of the project will be, then we would have to determine if it would be kind of a phased closure or how we would sequence things. But with the rec center, it is an addition, and there will be parts of the rec center that won't be, changed or modified. So conceivably, we could do something like that.
If you incorporate the senior center into that complex, would you include a kitchen?
We're not that far along in design, but I think that's good input. Yeah. Yep. Okay. I'll turn it over to Alex.
Thank you, Megan. So next we're going to talk about the new Civic Center. So similarly, we conducted an assessment on this current city hall to inform what those new plans might look like. And the first thing we noticed, as I mentioned earlier when talking about the timeline, is again there's been a significant growth and evolution of services in this building. Built 40 years ago, we've adjusted it as much as we can within these more than four walls, but we're kind of limited with what more we can do with this building in its current footprint. And so it's really not just meeting our needs now or into the future. There's also limited opportunity for residents to interface with staff and access services. So an example of this might be if you're a homeowner wanting to do an improvement to your home and want to come meet with someone from our building team. We currently do not have anywhere for people to just pop in, meet with staff, and get some questions answered. Through this assessment, we also identified a number of issues related to ADA. Just again, given with the age of the building, it was constructed before ADA was established, and so there are some things we would need to address with this current facility. An example is the actually reconstructing the entrance to the front of the building. It's not currently compliant, so that's a big ticket item that could be addressed through the construction of a new facility. And then more generally, there's, again, because of the age of the building, just a number of code compliance issues with this current facility in terms of safety. We would need to install an updated fire suppression system, redo some stairs, install a new elevator, things like that. And this current building is not built in a way that is efficient in terms of its operations, in terms of energy efficiency, really, is where we're getting. So the current building envelope, we'll use the term building envelope throughout this a number of times. When we say that, we're really just talking about the exterior, the walls, the foundation, the floors, not the floors, the doors, the windows, things like that. We're not built in a way that was efficient. And similarly, the mechanical systems are aging, and similar with the rec center, we're kind of past a point where we'd be able to just piecemeal update things. We would require a full retrofit of a lot of the systems in this building to ensure that they were as energy efficient as possible. And then finally, we identified a lack of community meeting space. This room we're in right now is where we host a lot of our public-facing meetings with city council, boards, and commissions, but we don't have any space where, say, a community group who needed somewhere to meet could come and reserve a space to have that meeting. And so when we were talking about new concepts or for a new civic center, we really wanted to ensure that any new facility would feel welcoming, be welcoming community space, and improve access. And so when we talk about access, we mean both physical access, of course, in terms of ADA and just getting into the facility, as well as access to services and the staff within that building. And then one that could really serve as a key investment in our downtown. This site is not far from where we are now. It is in our Old Town area, and so this could be a really exciting investment in our area. This would also provide a great opportunity to address some significant maintenance needs for this building. I've mentioned a few already: fire suppression, new elevator, redoing some stairs, but we also know we need to redo the roof as another example of kind of a high cost item for this current facility that this new building could provide the opportunity to address. And then finally, again, we're talking building envelope. This just newer materials, newer construction standards and means and methods would allow for improved energy efficiency. And the initial estimates were about a 30% improvement in terms of energy efficiency from our current building to the new building. So with all this in mind, we took a pass at some preliminary concepts for a new civic center. And so I'm going to take a moment to kind of orient you to this design. So this road here along the front of the building, that is public road. And so what's just to the right of the screen, not in this photo, is the RTD Park and Ride. So that's, again, just about 2 blocks north of where we are right now. And so what this new building would provide is really, initially, I hope you can tell, it would provide improved access. Again, so that's both the pedestrian and the connectivity access to public road itself. There's also, not really pictured well in this graphic, but our Inspire Trail, which is part of our city trail system, is on the northern side, runs kind of behind this. This would connect to that as well. There's also an opportunity for some new green space, perhaps a park, playground in this area. You can see that right on the corner there, the intersection. And then a big priority for this facility, as mentioned, was the improved community space. So this would not only improve formal public meeting spaces like the council chambers we're in now, but provide additional opportunities for community members to meet with each other, meet with staff. There'd be a more kind of centralized one-stop shop for accessing some of these city services. And then finally, a really key and exciting benefit of this new building is it would actually allow us to relocate our municipal court. So right now our municipal court is housed within our police department, which, as you might imagine, for those who are needing to undergo any court proceedings might not feel very welcome or comfortable, perhaps entering the police department to attend those court proceedings. So this would provide a really exciting opportunity to separate those two functions and keep our law enforcement functions physically separate from the judicial functions of the city. And so when we're talking about project status, as mentioned, the city already owns land for this work. Was purchased in 2020, and we've already completed the conceptual design that you just saw last year. So we did get some preliminary cost estimates from that work, but we would need to refine those as we get further into design, which again, just as with the recreation center, would be informed by pretty significant public input. And so we'd look at about a year for that, and then potentially up to 2 years of construction because it is a new facility. So I'll pause there for questions on the Civic Center.
That is actually near my neighborhood. Would it be a possibility of putting a light back in at Spalding and South Public, given the amount of traffic that this new Civic Center might cause in that area? Because it's pretty rough with just one stop sign there now.
Is this, okay, the stop sign, I see what you're
Yeah.
talking about. I can't say yes for sure, but any part of these more refined designs, we would certainly work with our transportation engineering and traffic engineers to make sure that any potential increase in traffic would be addressed, just as we would with any other development in the city.
And then my other question is, there is a builder in the United States who uses giant machines that operate like 3D printers. They are very energy efficient buildings, and they're easy to design, and they are also planning to use those type of buildings off planet. I would suggest that that would be one of the contractors that you contact and see, because I believe the cost savings might be pretty a lot too, because they're much less expensive than the type of building that you were showing there. Even though that one is beautiful, they can make those beautiful too. Just a recommendation. And
Wonderful.
thank you for all this information tonight.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Thank you so much.
What are you gonna do with this building, did you say?
We don't know yet, is the short answer. There would be a process of some sort engaging the community and city council to determine the future of this building and this site.
Because it just seems like this town is full of empty, dead, you know, blighted spaces. You know, like Baseline near the library looks terrible where that gas station is, and there's all that empty space there. And then what's going to happen with the old King Soopers grocery store, the empty bank, the empty floral place? I mean, I don't get it. I mean, because it doesn't seem to me, are people really moving here anymore? I mean, is this town really that big that we need all that? I just don't, I don't see it. I've been here for 20 years. I came here when there was nothing. There was no Coal Creek Trail, you know. There was nothing. So, I mean, I just don't get it. You know, are our property taxes going to get raised? They're already too high. So that's what I want to know. Maybe this isn't the right meeting. But that's okay.
Question, worst case scenario, this doesn't get passed this year or next year. What happens with the property that the city bought? Does it sit there until this gets approved, or is there an alternative use for that land that Lafayette purchased intending to use it for this building?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In the short term, I don't know that there's any, if this weren't to advance, I don't know that there's any plans to get rid of it, but that would probably be part of a larger conversation with city council about how these were prioritized and what next steps would look like.
I mean, I think my biggest question, That's true, exactly. I think my biggest concern would be is, as somebody who was born and raised in Lafayette, this building has a lot of significant history. I can remember it being a library, I can remember it being the police station. And so just to kind of wipe that away, and I mean, I don't see what other use you would have for it. The way you're describing, it would be more cost effective to drop it. I mean, that is kind of your intro to why this building over here is going to be so important. You know, we have a leaky roof and we have fire code issues or whatever. But I'm also concerned about the history of the people who have been here for generations and what this site really means for Lafayette. And so what do you plan to do with that? And then if you do drop it, I mean, the first thought that went in my mind was, yep, and the city will sell it and some developer will come in and we'll have another set of apartment buildings or vacant strip malls, or, you know, we're not even figuring out how to utilize the empty spaces we have now. And we're talking about as a city to do it yet again, to build something over there. And I do see the growth. I do see the importance of it. You know, we do want to have these community buildings to build community and have these spaces, but where is the balance and where is the protection of that history, and not just looking at the growth, preserving what has been here and what people have sacrificed for many years.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you highlight this building has seen a lot. It's been a library, police, it's always been a city hall, but also housed the library, housed our police department and things. So there has been a lot in this facility, and that's a really good point. So thank you.
Is there any possibility that you would consider doing these projects and dropping all these annexation projects?
They're unrelated.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
This would be one bond issue for 3 projects, correct?
We don't know that yet. So the next steps for this will be taking all this information and feedback to City Council to determine what that might look like on the ballot.
And the question is, do you do all 3 at once, or can you break them apart? And, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty, you know, in terms of material costs, labor costs, where, you know, what kind of interest rates on a bond would we be facing? In addition to cost constraints, I mean, how much risk is there with time overruns? You know, is labor for, you know, the trades going to be as readily available? And so I don't know if it's too, are we biting off too much to chew? You know, by doing all 3 at once. I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm asking the question.
Yeah, it's a great question and really key considerations that we're keeping in mind, and we'll definitely take to City Council when we have future discussions about this, because you're right, there is a lot of uncertainty right now, perhaps more than we've had in a very long time. And so well, I don't know that we have an exact answer tonight. That is certainly something we're considering and we'll share with City Council, is how to best sequence any projects that are advanced, if any, to make sure that we're being as responsible as possible, really.
And, you know, one of the points made is that obviously, you know, the rec center, you know, given the age, doesn't have the same appeal as Erie and Lafayette, Erie and Louisville. But boy, there's an awful lot of nice facilities around here, you know, between, you know, the YMCA and, you know, the Planet Access and 24-Hour Fitness and Louisville and Erie. And man, I mean, if we try to stay as good as these other facilities are, how do we know we're not going to get leapfrogged again? And, you know, we are looking like the sorry sister 10 years from now? My last question is, what is the projected population of Lafayette? Do we have that?
Yeah, I mean, kind of to the question that was posed or statement that was posed before, there's a lot of moving pieces with the state legislation right now that we're trying to factor into and kind of fight against because we don't want to be so high density, right? Our community is not that. We're not Denver. We're not kind of metro area. Before, kind of when I first started, we were about 75% built out. So at 30,000, that's about a 40,000 population kind of max. But we have a lot of moving pieces, but we are sort of intending for that population around that area where we're majorly built out.
So the best estimate would be 40,000 with significant uncertainties.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can talk to your state legislators.
I just want to make a couple of comments. I appreciate all of your questions. I mean, these are all really great input and questions. And, I think one thing is, it's a little bit of a conundrum to have these aging facilities, for the community and having our, of course, annual budget limits of what we can spend on maintaining them and having also some deferred maintenance issues and really kind of figuring out, okay, at what point can we no longer operate them in the long run in their current status as they continue to deteriorate. So I think we're really thinking about, how do we balance that? And, I think your points are great about just sort of the phasing and what those options are. So I think that's exactly what we want to talk about and explore. But we also want the community to understand that, it's not necessarily about shiny new things, but it's also about, what we have becomes very difficult and expensive to even maintain at a basic level, kind of over time. So it's kind of the looking at those trade-offs, and then at what point do we as a community want to make that significant investment to reduce that? Of course, that's going to happen in 30 or 40 more years, but to get a little bit, to get that lifespan. So, yeah. Okay. Good, yeah, good. There's one more question.
If these three projects were really cost prohibitive at this time, would it make sense to table them for 2 or 3 years and repair the streets that really need it first?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're looking at. So our council hasn't decided that they're going to the vote this year. In fact, we've given them timelines that look out years, right? The money that we have for our streets is the available general fund budget. And as you can see, the reason we're going out for a bond and for debt service and increased taxes is for that. So it would be more if we wanted to put the money towards the roads and the streets, it would still require an increase in taxes because what we have is that limited piece. So again, all of this is where we're trying to get that community input of what is the community's priorities, right? Because we have the buildings, but we also have a lot of different assets, so.
Can I ask, when you ask for input from the community, what kind of response do you normally get? Do you really hear from enough, or are you talking about 30 people who are really the ones who are giving you the input?
That's a great question. In my experience, our community is really vocal here, and what we're trying to do is get it from a variety of directions. So we're doing these 3 meetings. We're going out to Art Night Out, having booths. We're going to do an online survey that goes to all registered voters. So we're just trying to get a whole bunch of different pieces so that we can really weigh in from that community and kind of meet the community where they're at as well at different events. So we'll have stations at the library, stations at the rec center. So we're really trying to cast a broad swath so that, to your point, I have seen other communities where it is just a very small but vocal group that leads the way. And so I find that in Lafayette, we get a much more diverse kind of set of comments and people being engaged.
And the polling will we'll get sort of a statistically valid, pool of responses, and it will go out, like Katie said, to all voters who have voted in off elections with the exact sort of demographic profiles of those voters who have voted. So we feel that's going to give us a good diverse kind of profile of community input. And then hopefully we'll get more through these sessions. That's the goal of these sessions. Yeah. And we have a survey that we'll talk about online that everybody can take. So.
Yes. But today is the first day of formal engagement for this, so we encourage you to tell your friends. You'll see we'll have a project website at the end with more information in a survey, so yes.
One more comment. If we don't build things, particularly on that Civic Center property, I would suggest an alternative would be a wonderful big city park, green space area.
That's good feedback, thank you. Okay, oh, yes?
So I want to go back to the rec center. My question would be is with all the renovations that you guys are talking, are we talking about raising fees again over there? And I say again, I really have not been there or accessed it myself in a while, so I don't know where you guys are at. The reason I ask is I know when we did Lamont Doves, those prices went through the roof, and I know a community that I serve now has no access to that pool. And it's actually cheaper to take them outside the city of Lafayette to take a group somewhere that is low income. So my concern would be is that, again, all this building is great, I understand it's needed, but are we making sure that we are serving our lower income families in this? And I hear a lot of lip service about, we have the free passes, but how are they being dispersed? Because I know from my community, I'm not seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
I might let Director Heisel talk about this because we are undergoing a fee study.
Yeah, I would be happy to answer that. That is a great question. So we are currently just about to embark on a fee study to assess our cost recovery, see where our fees need to be. One big piece of that is our reduced rate program, evaluating it, its effectiveness, kind of how we distribute that and where communities' priorities are on that. Exactly, and how we let folks know about it. Yeah. Thanks for raising that.
Okay, we have one more quick project to cover, and so that is the service center. So this one's a little different. As Megan mentioned earlier, this is not a formally publicly accessible facility. So instead of the format we used for the other two projects, we're going to take you on a quick video tour just to see what goes on at this facility. Again, this is the oldest of those that we're talking about. This was originally constructed in 1973, and so this is where all of our Parks Public Works operations take place. This is really the hub for all of that. So that's where equipment is stored and maintained for like snow plows, maintenance trucks, fire trucks, police vehicles, ambulances, things like that, as well as the staff who maintain our streets, our utilities, and our parks across the city. So the video moves kind of quickly, so I'm going to kind of foreshadow what you'll see and try to call it out as we get through it. So the first thing is that you'll see some of our largest equipment doesn't really fit in this building. Again, this is 50 years old, and technology has changed. Our biggest equipment, like our ladder trucks for our fire department, do not fit in there to be maintained. So we have to do kind of some Tetris maneuvers to make sure that they can open up appropriately to access the engines and things like that. You'll also see that the exterior of the building and the building envelope, again, really there's not insulation in the building. There's holes in walls, which means it can't be climate controlled, which means not only an uncomfortable situation and environment at times when it gets really cold, but it also means that pipes freeze, they burst, they flood, and then we have to reconstruct piecemeal of this facility. You'll see a lot of our highest dollar equipment is stored at this site, but it is often exposed to the elements either completely, like you see here in this thumbnail, some of our maintenance trucks, or some of our larger equipment like our tractors and vac trucks are kind of partially covered, but they're still getting some exposure to sun, snow, hail, things like that. And then you'll also see that the building itself doesn't have adequate electrical capacity to meet what's necessary there. So we have a big old generator plugged into the building to provide backup when needed, as well as charge some of our electric equipment. And so I'm going to hit play and try to call some of those items out as we work through this building. Okay, so here you'll see our fire truck is working its way into the maintenance bay, but it cannot fully extend, and we have to be really careful about not hitting any of those pipes at the top because those are all fire suppression. And if if damaged, might flood the building, which is obviously not good. Here's our generator that's connected to the building as backup, as well as charging some of our electrical components and equipment. Here's some of that storage. That was the partially exposed storage, and that was the completely exposed storage there. Now we're looking at the inside of the building. So here you'll see holes in the walls, no insulation, some staff areas. Huh? Oh yes, heating and cooling. That's a break area that didn't have any insulation. You can see the metal walls there. And then here, interesting, we had some staff. You'll see the overalls that are hanging there drying. We had some staff who had to go out and repair a sewer line break. It was quite a messy operation. Had to come back, wash up, but we don't have good amenities for them to do so. So they had to do what they could to wash their outfits and then hang dry them there. That's what was being demonstrated there. So
you had mentioned the team was 4 people, but I imagine there are a lot more people that are watering the flowers and fixing the pipes work in and out of here, or is it just 4 people in this building?
Yeah, so when we were talking about the facilities team, they're actually housed out of City Hall right now. So that was just the team that maintains our general facilities. We have a much larger team out of here for our parks. Yeah. Okay. And so this building was part of that larger assessment that looked at the Civic Center as well. So I'm going to just briefly touch on some of the potential renovations to this facility, and then we'll turn it over to questions. So something I didn't address really in that video was you'll see here working left to right. The first improvement would be to the security on the site. Right now, the way it's designed doesn't really allow for proper security and protection of the assets at this site. So we would begin by improving that. And then the white area of this building is what's there now. So you saw kind of the aerial imagery in that video. And then on either end, those teal boxes, those would be the expansions and then some renovations within the footprint of the entire building. So on the north end, it would be reconfiguration of that's currently half fleet maintenance for our parks staff and then some office areas. So we would reconfigure that to make sure that it's most operationally efficient and keeping some of the staff away from the day-to-day fumes in that maintenance area. And then throughout the building, we would make sure that the electrical capacity is right-sized and updating the building envelope to improve the energy efficiency. And then finally, on the southern end, that larger addition, that would be for expanded maintenance bays and equipment storage. So the status on this project, as you just saw, we do have some preliminary designs and kind of an understanding of what needs to happen in terms of the insides of the building for space, but we would need to do some additional design specifically for this building because there's a lot of complex components and design, as you might imagine, for the fleet operations that take place. There's some hazardous materials, equipment at this site that we would need to take extra precaution to make sure is engineered in an appropriate way. So we would do that design. It would be about 6 to 8 months, and then construction would be about a year on the expansion to this. So that's the last project overview. I know we're getting close to time, but want to see if there are any questions on this project at the Service Center.
I definitely think that it's worthwhile to update those buildings and have more security for some very expensive equipment. Because those things are not cheap to replace, or they vandalized, or tornado or something, even though they're rare here. So that part of this, I'm fully on board with. The other two are a little questionable in my mind.
Thank you. Okay, turn it over to Megan.
Okay. All right, we're nearing the end.
Okay. So in terms of the project costs for these 3 projects, again, based on the kind of feasibility and the assessments that we did and the kind of schematic design, and we did factor in, contingency, soft costs, inflated costs over the course of a couple of years. The Recreation Center estimate is a $34 million project. The Service Center building, also $34 million. Sorry, the Civic Center building, also $34 million, and the Service Center, $6 million for that renovation. So the total cost of all 3 projects is estimated at $74 million. When we look at options for funding this, which again, we're going to talk about at the next session, but looking at an estimate based on a 20-year bond issuance, we would need to generate about $6 million a year for debt service. So again, kind of showing what we're currently able to invest in our facilities and capital projects of this level. It's above and beyond that, which is why we're having conversations about, how we address these projects and costs. So this is just a little tidbit about kind of the financing options. We have talked a little bit with City Council about property tax as an option, sales tax as an option. If we did a property tax on all 3 projects, it would be basically an additional $300 per year for the cost of an average home in Lafayette, which is about $685,000 for the average home. And for sales tax, it would be an estimated 0.85% increase in the city's sales tax. We are already our sales tax is already pretty high in Lafayette, so this would bring it up to close to a 10% sales and use tax. So at the April 30th community meeting, we'll dive a little bit deeper into kind of the analysis of the options that we looked at and that we've discussed with council, and again, get feedback on that. Okay. Would you like to move to next steps and then take questions? What do you think? Okay, it's going to be fast. That way we can finish and we'll take questions. So in terms of our process, we've had 2 conversations with City Council about this. They requested that staff go out and solicit community input. So they want to know what the community feels about this. So right now we're conducting engagement and polling. We will report the findings back to City Council at the end of May, and then Council will make a decision if this is something they want to move forward with, all, in part, right now, wait, kind of all those options are on the table for consideration. So if we are directed by Council to move forward, we would then, this summer work on the ballot language certification. We would continue with community outreach so people understand what these projects are, and then it would be on November 4th election. Again, anything could happen at this point. So that's why we're here. So here are the next steps. More community meetings to come April 30th. They'll all be in this room. They'll all be recorded. And then we have this website, which we've got brochures out there that have a QR code and the web address, so you can get on there, learn more, and also take a survey, and that'll give you a chance to give us more direct input. And you can also reach out to us at this email address, which is also on the brochures. Is it on the brochure? Is it on there? Yeah, on the brochures if you want to send emails directly. All right, questions? You had one here.
Well, I just was wondering is there a plan to dismantle the slide at the rec center? Are you just going to leave it there?
Yeah, there isn't a plan to dismantle it right now. If we go down this road, if we do a major, overhaul of the aquatic center at the rec center, we'll obviously have to pull it out and we would have a new slide. Otherwise, we'll have to revisit, what options are. But what we've learned from the engineers, and it basically failed its inspection, is that we would have to replace it. So that would be a huge investment that we would then have to prioritize with other maintenance efforts as well. Yeah. Okay, we have question boards outside, and the questions we would love to hear is, basically kind of what are your thoughts about the project? What are you excited about? What do you think is missing? What don't you like? Anything, you're welcome to write it on a sticky and put it on those boards. Otherwise, I'll go back to these communication efforts too. Any final words, City Manager Dolan?
No, thank you all for joining. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Thanks for all the questions.